All right, good morning. Happy Tuesday. As I was saying, everybody, welcome to Step Up Supervisor Training for Supervisor Orientation, the 2024 Step Up season. I'm so happy to have you here, and today we're going to be covering a lot. My name is Scott Kozlowski. I'm the Employer Engagement Manager for Achieve Twin Cities. While this is virtual, I do recommend that you try to keep your phones on silent so you can kind of stay focused. Try to keep your cameras on so we can engage with one another. And one of the best ways to really get a lot out of this training is to engage in the training. So we're going to have some opportunities for some interaction. Please interact. We're going to be using the chat function. And if you don't know where that is, you're going to see a little button with about 3 dots, and you should be able to click on it, look for the chat option, and that's going to help you jump into some of our conversations. And like I said, kind of before we started recording this, we're also going to be jumping into some group chats during the day. So you're going to be getting some resources in the chat. You're going to want to kind of check that out for what your collegial, teammates here are going to be sharing, because there's a lot of great information we can all share together. Today, we're going to be covering a fair amount of really important material. We're going to be looking over what Step Up actually is. I think a lot of you probably already know what it is. We're going to go ahead and revisit that just for a second. We're going to make sure that we understand who our interns are and what the components of a well-planned internship are, how to get ready for an internship. And this is even something that we've been talking about in our team because we're having an intern this summer as well, which is really exciting. And how we're going to structure that first week to make sure we're setting ourselves and our interns up for success, learning the role, teaching the role to our youth, and making sure that we're building those skills so they can succeed. We're going to talk about communication, coaching, and mentoring, and how we're going to support you. And something that I'm probably going to reiterate a couple times throughout the training today is that you are not alone. One of the best parts of Step Up is that you actually get the support of everyone here at Step Up that help make these matches. That's here to work with you and our youth to help overcome any challenges that you might have. And I just want to make sure that that sticks inside of your heart and your brain so you know that we're here for you. Of course, this is all about having a successful summer. So we're going to talk about how we successfully cross the finish line. There's going to be a little bit of time for some questions and answers. And then we're going to actually jump into some adaptive supervisor training with a wonderful trainer named Kayla. Before that, we will have a little break. So you'll have a moment to just kind of stretch, get some coffee, go to the bathroom, do what you need to do. So really quick to get things started off, we have so many people that I can't really do popcorn here. So jump into the chat and introduce yourself. Let us know your name, your organization, where you're from. And is this your first time supervising, your second time, your 10th time? What are you excited about, your internship this summer? What are you excited to teach your intern? Share a little bit about yourself. And by the way, on that note, please make sure that your names in your title for the Zoom here are your actual names. We're using that to track attendance today. All right, so I see people jumping in the chat. Thank you so much. It's great. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, as you can see, as folks are starting to drop in the chat here, there are a lot of really amazing, people in our community that engage in this work. And I want you to really take this in as well. There are so many people across hundreds of organizations that are showing up in our training today. So we have literally people from nonprofits, government sector, for-profits, corporations, big businesses, small businesses, and we're all here because we have this common value of developing the talent in our region. And if you need something to feel good about right now, look in the chat. Everyone here, I applaud you. It's so great to have you here. I'm going to keep moving as you guys are introducing yourself because we actually have a lot to cover. Step Up is actually a partnership of 4 different organizations, including a government agency as well. So the City of Minneapolis, which is the administrative oversight of the whole program. It's a Minneapolis program, and the Level 1 program. So we actually have youth from ages 14 to 15 that are in our Level 1 program, and then Achieve Twin Cities is where we're at, and we cover the level 2 programming. So we get those 16 to 21-year-olds, and we are there to support some of the more advanced internships throughout the summer. We also have the wonderful pleasure of getting to work with Deed and Career Force, and they actually support level 1 programming, but they do a lot of other work as well, as you learn. And then Project for Pride in Living actually helps create our work readiness training, and they also help us with our career exploration program. So there's a lot of great work that we all do together. And since 2003, we've done over 34,000 internships as a community. And this year, we're doing even more. Next year, we hope to do even more. So please, as you're going through this experience this summer, think about all the ways that you're growing as well as the ways that you're helping our youth grow. Let's talk about this as a way to grow our community. Now, our mission here at Step Up is to bring Minneapolis young people together with Twin Cities employers through internships and training, work training, on-the-job training that build careers, develop skills, and lead to a diverse, skilled, and equitable workforce. That's what we're all here to do. That's why we all signed up for this. And it is something that I think is worthy of celebrating. So as you're talking with your team, in your company or your organization, let them know what this is really about, and also ask how they can get involved. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Our vision is an equitable, inclusive community with sustainable careers and economic justice. And I know that that is a shared value. Just a little bit about how we get to this internship, summer that's coming up. There's actually a lot of work that goes into this. We had thousands of youth sign up because they wanted to have an internship this summer. And then they have to go through a whole process to get to the place where they're eligible to be an intern for you. So I just want to let you know that we've actually gone ahead and made sure that they've gone through an application process. They had to take the initiative to do that. They've had to do some work readiness training in order for them to be eligible to have a match. They've actually also had to go through some actual professional training to get ready for that first day. And we go ahead and we make matches based on all of those conversations, and we align our youth's interests and goals with the work they're going to do for you. So, our whole mission here is to try to get, alignment around the trajectory of our youth and the work that you're doing with them. Throughout the summer, we actually have a lot of different ways that we're going to support you. And there are a lot of opportunities for helping grow the talent in our young people. Job coach support, again, that's going to be a Step Up team here, and I'll introduce you to the job coaches a little bit later. You're actually going to also be doing a lot of training this summer. We're going to talk about how we set that up for success, but also everyone here is a mentor. I just want to go ahead and highlight that, because being a mentor and being a supervisor don't have to be different things. In fact, if we bring them together, as you'll see a little bit later, there are a lot of benefits that both you and our youth are going to get out of that. And we're going to be here to help you solve any kind of challenges that arise. Our young people are still developing as adults. So they're going to be just regular young people challenges that we're going to have to address. And just so you know, that's normal. Okay. I want you to have some realistic expectations. And what this all comes down to is career exploration, right? When we're talking about the work that we're doing with our youth, I really want you to think about how we're bringing these pieces together. So we're helping them develop their interests and their skills. And if we can have some really good conversations as mentors with our youth, we're going to align their goals with the work they're doing for us. Okay. So we've been talking about our intern at Step Up here, and we've been thinking about their skills and their interests and what they want to do and the kind of work that we're going to do with them. And we're really focusing on developing and cultivating greater confidence and ability and technical ability in their own skills, as well as helping them get some new skills. We're also looking at how they're going to impact our organization. And by the way, these youth are going to come in and do real work. They're incredibly talented, they're creative, and they want to be working with you. And when we do those two things, we're also developing that future workforce talent. We are literally cultivating the community in which these young people can see themselves working. Some of them have maybe never even thought about doing the kind of work that you do. So that exposure is going to open their minds, get them curious, and hopefully get them to start having some really great conversations with you and your colleagues around you. So, it's really important to understand that, again, oh, there we go. Our young people are going to come to us from a couple of different backgrounds with, their own stories, and everyone here is going to get an individual. Okay. Your job is to get to know your intern for who they are, to celebrate them for who they are, and to actually enable the things that make them feel confident in who they are as well. When we do that, they're going to do better work, they're going to be excited, and they're going to be engaged. Okay. At level 2, our youth again are going to be from ages 16 to 21, and they're going to live in Minneapolis. They're not currently enrolled in college, though some of them might be in some post-secondary courses. They're eligible to work in the United States of America, and they're probably going to come from low income and/or experience some additional barriers that might be some learning disabilities, that might be, related to a couple of other factors in their life. And most importantly, our youth are enthusiastic learners and future leaders. And that last part is what I want you to focus on as we're doing this work together this summer, okay? These youth are our future leaders. They might come into the workforce and be your boss one day. So treat them well, okay? Let's help them become leaders that are compassionate and capable and actually qualified, okay? These skill sets that we're going to develop are going to be developed in young people that are much younger than us. And we need to remember that that means there are going to be some differences in thoughts, differences in ideas about the world. And that's something to be curious about, okay? In our young workforce, community is everything. So building up a mentorship community around your intern, being engaged in the actual workforce, not just the job. Don't just like throw them into a dark office and run away, right? Keep them engaged in your community. That's going to mean a lot to them and keep them feeling like the work that they're doing is relevant. Transparency is everything, and we need to model transparency and vulnerability if we want some of our youth to be vulnerable and transparent with us. Trust is earned and goes both ways. Those are directly related items, okay? If, for example, some of our youth are going to have some, need some accommodations that could be related to neurodiversity or disability or just learning differently, or maybe dealing with some like PTSD. We don't really know exactly all the things that are going on unless our youth shares that with us, right? And the only way they're going to feel safe to do that is if we are creating an environment where we're modeling vulnerability and honesty and openness, so they understand that that's something that's okay. And actions are louder than words with our youth, okay? So saying you're going to create that space and creating that space are not the same thing necessarily. We need to make sure that we're cultivating that intentionally. And in our team, we've been really thinking a lot about how do we set up our office the right way? How do we make sure that there's always someone touching base with our youth? And also, how do we do that in a way where we're not feeling completely overwhelmed as well? So as you're working with your team, as you're thinking about, managing your youth this summer, keep some of those things in mind. And if you need any help finding solutions, reach out to your job coach or me, and we'll help you do some brainstorming, and we'll be there in thought partnership with you. And most importantly, our youth want experiences that help them on the way towards their goals. Okay. Keep that in mind, and also keep in mind that there are a lot of places developmentally that our youth are still growing. These are young people, okay? They're at a place right now where they are going to be developing intellectually, physically, socially, and emotionally. Some of them might come in with amazing soft skills and they will be vibrant and really engaged, but they won't know how to do an Excel spreadsheet, and that's okay. We need to get ready to teach them that. Some of them are going to come in with incredible technical skills. They've probably already coded their own games, but they won't know how to write an email. Okay. Remember, that's our job. Our job is to identify where they have strengths and where we can help them grow throughout the summer. You may have had a plan already, so be ready to be a little bit flexible, and that's a great foundation. We'll talk more about how we can be flexible and how to set up that foundation in just a moment. So One of the other things I need to just kind of highlight again, I know that we're out of the pandemic, but our youth that are coming into, intern with everyone right now had an experience that was during a really crucial part of their development. Okay, so keep that in mind. We are still seeing a lot of impacts from the pandemic. In fact, there are a lot of mental health impacts that may come into place as well. So developmental changes drive young people to seek approval from their peers and from you. Okay. It may take time for them to open up because they want to be accepted, right? The quicker they know that they're a part of your team, the quicker they're going to open up about who they are, what their aspirations are, and what their goals are, and maybe where they're struggling, right? Letting them know that it's okay to struggle is going to be a great way to be available for them in case they are struggling. Teens reported more anxiety and depression during the pandemic shutdowns, and that trend has continued. Okay, so that's something that we're still kind of dealing with. Keep it in mind, and don't be heavy-handed with that conversation, but just check in, and you'll notice that as you cultivate that relationship, something might pop up. Other things might pop up. For example, we live in a world where we're starting to recognize that neurodiversity is a part of our world. By the way, it's also something that historically, and probably in our generation especially, has been something that's stigmatized. Keep that in mind. It's something that youth encounter sometimes at school, sometimes at home, but it's a natural part of being a human being. Neurodiversity is the product of natural variations in human neurology that lead to differences in cognition, sensitivities, and perception. This can include ADHD, autism, dyslexia, epilepsy, OCD, developmental delays, and learning differences, and more. Again, each youth is different, okay? Every youth is going to be unique and need different things. Some youth will disclose what they need, some will not. Some won't really have any needs so much as they need to be a part of your community. Identifying how you can help your youth succeed is exactly what we're here to do. And by the way, this is a great skill and a great onboarding process for anyone that is already a manager. It's a good practice to come in with someone that isn't actually, completely skilled or trained or educated, because it really highlights where in your onboarding process you need to put a little bit of extra attention. Okay. Some good practices to kind of try to figure these things out are going to be, how do you learn best, right? Do you prefer visual checklists? When I'm explaining something, do you want me to use pictures or do you prefer it in writing? Okay. Is there anything that you'd like me to be aware of so that I can best support your success this summer? Okay. When we're talking about neurodiversity and disabilities, again, I just need to highlight this. A lot of our youth are used to being stigmatized. A lot of people in our generation, maybe in the workforce, have neurodiversity or a disability, and maybe have never shared that because we're afraid of being stigmatized. Our youth are in the same boat. Okay. In fact, there are some real ramifications of this stigma and bias in the workforce. In fact, with Minnesotans with disabilities, ages 18 to 64 have a 56% labor force participation rate compared to a 90% labor force participation rate for those without disabilities. So we're really trying to break down some barriers and recognize the strengths in our youth, because if we can see their strengths, they're going to gain confidence and they're going to come into our workforce ready to provide everything they can, which means they're going to be contributing to our work culture and our community in really amazing ways. People with disabilities face many barriers to employment. Like I said, social stigma, unconscious bias, lack of accommodations. We'll talk more about that. Workplace flexibility. In other words, like understanding that, if we just change a couple things around, they're going to be okay, but that's not how we've done things in the past. Well, let's try to find solutions so that we can get the work done and also make sure that our youth are okay. Okay. A lack of assistive technology. Some folks might have a hard time seeing or hearing or reading. Okay. Transportation. and policy bias, right? We live in a world that came from the past. That means that bias still exists inside of a workplace. Just want to highlight this for any organization that has under $5 million in annual revenue. If you need to provide any accommodations outside of what we can provide, you can contact this guy named Ray McCoy. He's the director of a program called the Employer Reasonable Accommodation Fund that is through Deed, one of our partners, by the way. And they offer up to a $30,000 a year in reimbursements for folks that need to provide accommodation. So that can be for a seasonal or full-time employee, like an intern, right? Or even for volunteers that keep showing up in your organization. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that that's out there. Please take advantage of that. Take a screenshot, share it, disseminate it. We can have a huge impact for folks with neurodiversity and disabilities in our community by making sure that they have what they need and that we're their advocates. Now, this kind of plays into another aspect of the beautiful diversity that offers us so much open-minded opportunity. So cultural competency is something that we also need to be aware of, okay? I was born and raised in central Minnesota, and I had to travel the world before I realized that a lot of other people thought very differently about the world than I did. And I'm really happy that I did that. I had a great opportunity to live in Thailand for about 8 years, where I got to encounter about every culture and religion on the planet. It was amazing. But coming from central Minnesota, I didn't have that same experience. So just please be aware that religious accommodations are something that you're going to possibly need to make this summer. And that's going to possibly be like prayer time. It might be something like celebrating a holiday that isn't a holiday you're used to. Possibly food restrictions, but that can also be a food allergy thing too. So it's just kind of good practice to check in if you're going to be providing food or any of those kind of things. Some folks might be still learning how to speak English completely fluently. Or might have a little bit of an accent. That is an indicator of someone that has some great experience and insight into the world. And also, some folks may not be able to make eye contact, or it might not be culturally normal for them to make eye contact or to do handshakes, right? And that is something that you're going to need to check in on with your intern before you reach out to make a handshake or expect that they're just going to make eye contact. Sit back and reflect. Ask a question. Be curious. Be compassionate and curious, and you'll probably get a honest, transparent answer about what makes them feel comfortable and what you can do together. Something that I do is I'll sometimes say, "Hi, my name is Scott." I'll touch my chest as a way of shaking hands instead of shaking hands because I'm used to shaking hands. It's kind of like the thing I can do tactilely with my hand to get that out of the way. Now, this summer, a lot of young folks have indicated they're going to be having many different forms of transportation. And we have probably been reaching out to you, possibly bothering you to try to figure out how we can organize getting that transit pass to you so that you can get it to our youth. Most interns have in-person or hybrid internship experiences will receive a transit pass for the summer. And on that note, there are logistics that go around transportation that are very important for you to communicate with your youth, right? So if they're taking the bus every single day, but they always seem to arrive 5 minutes late. Is that just a schedule for the bus that they're on? Have a conversation with them, right? Don't assume that they're not showing up because they don't want to show up. Maybe there's something going on with their transportation. Having a conversation before the internship starts that includes a conversation around transportation is going to help you both get on the same page around those logistics for transportation and expectations that you have as well. Okay, so please just make sure you have that conversation and ask the intern about the transportation schedule, right? So you can, not be surprised by those things so much as you can be proactive in understanding what that's going to look like for the summer. All right, so I know I'm saying a lot here. I hope that you're writing fast. If your hands need a little shake, take a little shake. We're going to talk here in just a moment about the components of a well-planned internship. And it's always a little strange for me to do these things virtually because I'm used to having a little bit more engagement in a classroom. But we're going to get to some more of that engagement here coming up in just a bit. So, our goal, and I know that everyone's goal here, is to have a high quality internship, right? This is something that is meaningful for us as supervisors. It's something that we want to do in a way that, our youth get a lot out of it, and so do we. Okay. And I just want to highlight the fact that this is a two-way street. You're not only signing up to support our youth, you're signing up to do some personal development in the meantime. In fact, I am not your best teacher this summer. Your teacher is going to be your intern. Okay. And one of the best ways you can set your intern and you up for a good working relationship is to get to know each other. No, it's not really mind blowing. Hopefully, no one's hair got blown back there, but please make sure to send out a request. Excuse me. Please make sure to send out and request the About Me form. And Teresa, could you drop into the chat here really quick? And I want everyone to click on this, copy it, bookmark it. This is the hidden resource page for supervisors, and you're going to find the About Me form for supervisors and youth. Take some time and fill that About Me form out, right? Again, this is that opportunity for you, thank you, Teresa, to be vulnerable, to be open, to maybe start setting a foundation for a space where your youth are going to feel comfortable sharing more about themselves, and ask for them to share something about themselves as you're having these conversations. We have an amazing supervisor handbook that has all this information and even more covered as well. Make sure you kind of flip through that if you are seasoned and have been around for a while. We've made some edits, so just take some time, look through that. There are also some really amazing forms that we provided for you that hopefully can make your job easier. And we've also provided some additional resources. We've recognized that, trying to get as much information and as many resources into your hands is beneficial for you, our youth, and our community in general. In fact, one of the things we try to aggregate this year are some resources to make sure that you have the ability to support youth in case you recognize that there are some hunger challenges, possibly some struggles with high mobility or homelessness. These aren't things that are for sure going to pop up, but there's something that has happened, right? You might have a mental health crisis. We put some resources in there. They might just need a new shirt, okay? They might need some professional clothes. We have tried to find as many resources as we can, and we are always open to hearing about additional resources that you recognize in our community. So please, help this program grow, help support our youth. If you see anything else in our community that could be useful as you look through these resources and forms, share. I'm always open-minded. And what we're going to talk about next is we're going to talk about prep work and getting ready for your interns and how we're going to structure that first week. Okay. All right. So, we want to have a rewarding experience. And that About Me form is that first part of the conversation where we really highlight, who we are, why we are where we are, why we're excited to be who we are. But we also need to know that about our youth, right? Having a rewarding experience for our youth means that they understand in context how their goals, their aspirations align with the work they're doing with you. Sometimes youth don't understand that they're building foundational skills that will help them go anywhere that they want to. Talk with them about that, but start with what are your goals? So identify your intern's goals and the skills they will learn this summer. A really good rule of thumb is to think about the projects that you want to accomplish this summer with your intern, and then think about the skills they need to accomplish those projects, and then think about the work plan we're going to talk about as the space where you're teaching those skills, practicing those skills, creating deliverables, and achieving your goal. Okay. And it's kind of a quick breakdown of how I kind of think about that. Hopefully that helps you kind of think about that as well. But if you can align that whole process with how they're growing towards their professional goals or their aspirations, they're going to be involved, they're going to be invested, and they're going to see the relevance of that work. Clearly communicating what is expected is also very important. My mom always said, clarity is kindness, because clarity doesn't leave room for gray, right? Right. The clearer we are, the better off our youth are going to be, the less frustrated you're going to be because our youth understand. And checking in is also something that's going to help out as well. We'll talk about that in a second too. But our youth are also here to earn a paycheck and hopefully earn a letter of a recommendation. I don't want you to hold this out as a carrot. I want you to make it like, hey, when we get this internship done this summer, I want to be able to write into a letter of recommendation for you the skills that you've learned, the things that you've accomplished, and help you like look at your resume so that we can help you continue on this path towards your own success and fulfillment and professional development. Um, Remember, you're a supervisor, and I really would be honored if we could also have you be a mentor. I know that everyone here has that mindset, so I'm not too worried about that part, but it makes a big difference. Now, another really important part that I keep talking about, and I'm sorry if I'm hitting it on the head a little bit too much, but it's cultivating a safe space uh, for growth. Our youth are humans. They're young people. They are going to make some mistakes. They are going to sometimes show up late. Maybe sometimes wear, something that you're like, I don't really know how I feel about that. But the most important thing that you can do is have communication with our youth that is respectful and also ongoing. Okay. There's a difference between mentoring and coaching. There's also a difference between being curious and judging. Okay. So if we're curious about where our youth are, we're going to be able to learn as well. And we're going to be able to understand the things that our youth need to feel comfortable with who they are. We live in a world of beautiful diversity, and there is so much opportunity in that diversity because it offers a bigger palette of opportunity for thought partnership. Our youth are so creative and they see the world in ways that we can't because we've been in the world for a while. We think the world is this way, but they see it as this big, open, possible canvas, and they think of it in ways that could help us rethink how we think about the world. So be a mentor, have that relationship, but also remember that we're here to teach them technical skills that can help them achieve specific goal sets. Like I said, we've been talking about making sure that our intern knows how to do Excel, right? So we're talking about a training program around Excel, but what specific skills, right? We're not just trying to throw like Excel at them. There's a lot in there. We're thinking, what do they need to learn about Excel to do the work we want them to do? Having feedback and corrective action is going to be a part of your summer as well, just like we all need, right? Constructive criticism, that's constructive, helps them build up professional skills and recognize where they have strengths and where they need to like maybe develop some strengths. And familiarize yourself with the support resources that we have. Again, we have a lot of these, and we're going to get to that in just a second. We have a lot of those forms. We have a lot of resources. We have the supervisor handbook. That's going to help you maybe navigate some of those spaces. We'll get into that in more detail in just a second. So your responsibility this summer is to prepare and orient your intern to the workplace. Some of them have maybe had jobs in the past. Some of them have not. All of them are going to be new to you and new to your workplace, most likely. Help them navigate that world. Help them navigate that world by facilitating a rewarding experience, like we just said, by matching their goals with the work they're doing with you, but also by building that community. Make sure that everyone in your workplace knows the intern is there, and coach them on advocating for the intern, right? Coach them on being the mentor. The mentor might not be you. Don't be insulted by that. That's okay. It might be a colleague of yours that just has a dry, sense of humor that clicks with the youth. That's okay too. Encourage that. Our goal is to help them cultivate skills. And that is part of cultivating a safe space for growth. Okay. Identifying their goals and skills is going to help them on their path of understanding what they're doing with you and why what they're doing with you is helping them move towards their goals. And the skills they're going to learn with you are important as well to identify. Make sure they understand that they're going to be developing these skills. Have a work plan. I've been really holding back, if you can't tell, on getting more into that, but we'll talk about that in a second. Give constructive feedback. And my favorite, be an advocate. Be an advocate in your workplace. Be an advocate in our community. Be an advocate for Step Up, and also be an advocate for the kind of workplace that is going to be a safe workplace where everyone can thrive. This is what we're here to do. In fact, I know that I've been talking a lot. I'm going to give you a little finger break here, and I'm going to have everyone jump into the chat. And please tell your community here, how will you prepare for your intern this summer? Let me give you guys a couple minutes. Jump into the chat. Doesn't have to be anything mind-blowing. Just show everyone that you've been thinking about this a little bit, okay? Be ready to be flexible. That's great. Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you. Yes, exactly. Checking in on a daily basis actually has some huge benefits we'll talk about. Yes, one-on-one meetings. Really quick note on one-on-one meetings. It's a great idea. Make sure that's done in a space that is open and accessible so that someone can walk by. Yep, being flexible and sharing feedback and receiving feedback. Yes, exactly. Orientation, tours, welcome lunch. Nice. I always like a good lunch. Have brainstorming projects. Yeah, you've been brainstorming projects to do with them. That's great. You guys are coming so fast, I can't even read them all. I love it. Keep it coming, guys. This is looking great. Yes, looking for opportunities for an intern to participate in training opportunities. Yep, looking to develop those skills. That's really build a cadre of peership by bringing in more than one intern. High five. I'm all about that. That is beautiful. That gives them a space to have water cooler talk, okay? Which is a part of sometimes digesting the work they're doing, right? That's an important place there. That's great. Exactly. All right. And and to answer a quick question, yes, we're recording this. You'll be able to revisit this again later, okay? Yep. Learning from your intern. I'm going to move on after that one right there. Learning from my intern. That's right. Yeah, you have an opportunity this summer as well. And I really hope that you can take advantage of it. If you're an open-minded, compassionate person, which I know everyone on here is, you have an opportunity this summer to take in some information from your intern. They're going to teach you about the new generation that's coming up in the workplace, help you think about how you kind of need to think about managing folks in that space, and they're going to give you some skills too. This is a two-way street. I hope you can celebrate that this summer. Great feedback, everybody. Thank you for engaging in the chat. All right. Anyone that's into, the TV show The Office, oh my God, okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm. Maybe you've been having conversations like we have in our office. You're like, oh no, it's almost June 24th. What are we going to do? And that's okay. But also like, don't worry too much. Let's make a plan. As long as you are having those conversations, you're already on the right path. Don't be too worried. Just make sure that you start checking some things off on the checklist that we're going to talk about here today. You're going to end up having an amazing internship if you do that. So one of the first things you got to check off is, have you contacted your intern before the internship starts? Now, I'm guessing for onboarding purposes, your HR definitely has. Have you? Okay. What kind of conversation have you had with them? Did you have that about me form yet? Probably not. Here's a great reason to check in with them. See, like, hey, I just wanted to introduce myself and share a little bit about me. Could you share a little bit about yourself as well? Okay. Use that as an opportunity to check in again. This is a great time to start cultivating trust between you and your intern. Plan and build a welcoming environment to create belonging. When you're talking with your intern, make sure that you're not going to like have them walking into an office that goes, surprise, bang. What if they have social anxiety? Check in with them about what they feel comfortable about. But like also make sure that when they're walking in, everyone's aware that they're coming into the workspace. Make sure that everyone's welcoming and engaging in conversation. That's going to help them feel really good. That alone is going to make a big difference. Identify a mentor or mentors or a mentorship community. Okay. Like I said, it doesn't always have to be you. I know that like we're like, I'm a really good person, I'm going to be the mentor. But if they don't click with you, don't take it personal. It just means that, they recognize something that maybe they identify in someone else as a point of connection. That doesn't mean that you're not a mentor, by the way. Sometimes mentors step back and let youth learn. Developing a work plan, and that is something that is absolutely essential to success. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. So in a little bit more detail, contact your intern before they start should include an interview and sending a hiring letter. Hopefully you've been hearing from our team asking you if you sent a hiring letter, asking if you've already had that interview. A lot of you have already been doing that work, and I appreciate you so much. And some of you have been just so on it that I get an update that everything's already done. I appreciate you for doing that. Thank you. You're incredible. Make sure you've introduced yourself and you've welcomed them and let them know what to expect, okay? Fill out and share and ask for an about me form. That might be important to us this year. Okay. So please do that. If you haven't noticed, I've talked about it a couple of times. And provide some basic logistic information for their first day. Okay. So, for example, Achieve Twin Cities is in a locked building that you have to have a key card to get into. When we're talking with our intern, we're going to have to arrange where they're going to meet, what time they're going to meet us there, how they're going to get in, what that looks like. So like arranging those logistics is really important. Also having a conversation about who to call if they can't get in. Provide more than one phone number if you can. What if your phone dies? What if you're late for work that day? Make sure that you have those supports in place for them. And then also talk about, just some basic logistics on how they should communicate with you if something's going funky with their car. Maybe they were trying to drive in, but they have an old car. Maybe they, have a sibling that they were taking care of, and there was something that happened there, and they're gonna be a little bit late. Have those conversations ahead of time, and that's gonna help you guys, have a smoother ride throughout the summer. Making sure that you have a welcoming environment is essential. Have the workspace ready. Are they going to work in a cubicle? Are they going to work at a desk? Are they going to work at a welcoming station? Are they going to work in a workshop? What are they doing? Where are they going to work? Do they have a place to hang up their jacket? Do they have a place to put their lunchbox? Should they bring lunch, by the way? These are some really important conversations you need to make sure that you're having. And having clear guidance on what they will need to perform their duties, whether they are remote or in person. If it's technology they're going to need, make sure you're ready to provide that. If there's onboarding with that technology, like we have at Achieve Twin Cities, make sure that that's something that's a part of their onboarding process. Be clear about that onboarding process as well. Let coworkers know that the interns are starting to ask them to show enthusiasm about their presence. Promote a bias-free work environment and use respectful language and be an advocate for that environment. That's going to help change our workforce so that youth are feeling welcomed and want to be in the spaces with you. And encourage your peers to regularly interact with your intern. You are not alone, and neither is your intern. You have colleagues, and you have everyone here at Step Up to have your back as well. Please, before a red flag becomes a red firework flare, reach out to somebody, reach out to someone around you, reach out to us, reach out to your job coach. We want to help you have a great experience. We want your youth to have an amazing, rewarding experience. And we are here to problem solve anything with you that we need to. We're also here to help you even make improvements. Things don't have to be going bad for you to have thought partnership with us, by the way, okay? Identify a mentor for your intern. I've talked about this. I keep talking about it because it's an important factor in our youth success. It has a huge impact on their sense of belonging. Intentional time for conversations about professional development and career pathways outside of work duties. This ties into that whole goal again that I was talking about, right? Our youth have aspirations. Some of them want to be the person that solves climate change. Some of them want to be a person that works really hard and gets a house. Some of them want to be the person that solves a social challenge that vexes our society. And all of them are going to do something that's going to have a huge impact in our world. What unique interests do they have? Okay. Talk about that with them. Align it with the work that they're doing with you and the skills that they're learning. Make sure there's time to reflect on their work and work environment. You have an opportunity to learn about your work environment from your youth. I guarantee you, if you've cultivated that open, transparent conversation, you might have some things that you have to do to improve as well. That doesn't mean that you're not doing great. We're all people. We're all here to learn, including our youth, including us. Okay, keep that in mind. And share your work history and stories of successes and failures. Yeah. We all make mistakes, and there's an opportunity to learn from those mistakes. There's also opportunities to model how to be successful in spite of mistakes. Sometimes youth come in and they think it's all or nothing, right? Either I'm really good at this or I make a mistake and now I'm bad. Okay. Break that break that thinking, okay? Like instead encourage the thinking of growth thinking, right? Growth mindset means that we're going to have days where we're really on top of things and days where we fall down. And if we have an amazing work culture, our teammates are going to be there to lift us up when we're down and help us go even higher when we're doing well. Okay. Keep that wrapped into your culture and keep that wrapped around your intern. And of course, if you have any questions or need any additional resources, we have that handbook that is in that supervisor page that we shared with you. We're going to share it again to make sure that that is accessible to you in case you didn't catch it before. Now, specifically when we're talking about building an internship work plan, we need to first identify the work they're going to be doing. What goals are they trying to achieve for your organization? And oh, nice. I like all these notes. Keep the conversation going, guys. We need to make sure that we're identifying what goals they're going to be working towards. We also need to communicate what those goals are and how they impact our organization, right? Saying, I'm going to build a detailed Excel spreadsheet doesn't sound the same as, hey, we're going to organize around employers so that we can have better communication with them next year. And your work is helping us understand how we've done well and where we're going to improve on that. Those are very different goals in terms of how our youth is hearing what they're doing. Okay. And ask your colleagues for their ideas and suggestions. You might even end up having a conversation with your intern that blows your mind, and they might help you create an organizational shift. It has happened. There have been policies that have come out of conversations with our youth. Okay. They are very perceptive of the world around them and have incredible ideas. And connect with previous supervisors. Really quick, just want to highlight you are right now connecting with other supervisors. You're a part of a bigger community of supervisors, and we're going to have some opportunities to connect with each other this summer. Structuring your work plan is, taking that goal and breaking it down into achievable milestones and daily tasks. Okay, so we're going to look at the big picture. What's the big thing we want to accomplish? What skills do we need to learn to accomplish that? We're going to take those skills and put them into our onboarding and continual skill development attached to milestones and daily tasks that build up a foundation that helps build the house of the goal that we want to accomplish. We have some tools for that. I'm going to make sure you have access to them. A lot of you are managers and have probably created work plans, but having a work plan is something that will set your youth up for success. Almost all youth thrive with checklists because it's clear, and clarity is kindness. Okay. Develop one or two large projects and smaller day-to-day projects that they understand are part of something bigger. Okay. That way they understand the relevance of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And make sure goals are measurable. And I'm going to also add achievable. Okay. You might recognize that your youth is more talented than you thought they were going to be, and they can do more. You might recognize that they need some supports, and maybe you need to tone it down a little bit. Flex with that, but recognize that they're going to be in a space of growth. And if you're having those check-ins, you're going to need to maybe make some adjustments to either ramp up what the project is or maybe just tone it down a little bit so that it can be achievable. Okay. And make the work meaningful. I've talked about that a lot. Projects should provide variety and challenge, focus on deeper development of skills, and talk about what those skills are and why they matter. Okay. And they should connect to the workplace impact. Again, talking about that organizational impact so they can understand that they're helping something bigger happen. Okay. And provide additional career exploration opportunities. That's that mentorship side of things. Okay. Now, when we're providing instructions, we need to also make sure that we are clear. There's a couple of different models here I'll kind of cover, and some things that I need you to keep in mind as we're doing that, okay? So who should carry out the work and is responsible for it? What is supposed to be done and what is expected to happen? Being clear about these things again. Where the task is to be completed, right? Don't go hide in the closet and make the project. This is your cubicle. If you don't feel comfortable here, you need to walk around. This is the lunchroom. You can sit here. Okay. Have some opportunities for them to know where they can do their work. when the task is to be completed, okay? And also, like, I'm going to say this as well. So the when part is something where we need to maybe think about having them know that they can give you some feedback if they're not doing well. Hey, I want this to be done by the end of the day. I'm going to check in around lunchtime to see how you're doing. If you're struggling before that, let me know so I can help you get on track. Okay. That way they know that it's okay to ask for help. Okay. They are trying to fit in at a workplace. So they might not feel comfortable asking for help unless they know that that's okay. Make sure they know that that's okay. Why the task needs to be accomplished, what bigger goals that a part of, and how the task needs to be done. I'm going to stop here for a second too. Okay. Saying, hey, I need everyone here to engineer a car doesn't mean that anyone here knows how to engineer a car. We do have some engineers in our program this year, and so you're the exception. With that exception, however, being realistic about how the task needs to be done, and then providing the training, maybe some modeling, and maybe even just kind of being around so you can help them figure things out. Now, if you've broken down your goals, identified skills they need to accomplish those goals, and have an onboarding process that includes onboarding training, hopefully they're really just refining those skills as they're moving forward. Okay. That's going to help take work off of your plate as well, and hopefully provide a less stressful environment for you this summer. If you've identified skills and you train them early, you're going to have less questions to answer. And those questions are probably going to be more like, hey, how do I do this specific function? Okay, great. Thanks for showing me. They can continue about their day. Okay. And how the time work is recorded is an important part of this as well. Okay, this is going to play into like when they should take breaks, when they should and should not check their cell phones, and that's going to help them understand where they need to be. Smart goals for your work plan, right? You can always state what you'll be doing, be specific, right? Use action words. In other words, describe things as things they will be doing. You will use the Excel spreadsheet to create these formulas to analyze this data. It's pretty advanced, but if you've got them there, great. Make sure it's measurable. Hey, I want to make sure that we've got this data put in here so we can analyze it by 12 o'clock tomorrow. And, there are about 100 of these that I'm hoping to have done by then. Okay. And provide a way to evaluate that. So let them know what you're going to be evaluating and looking for. Make sure it's achievable. Okay. This is going to be related to realistic expectations based on the individual that you are lucky enough to work with this summer. Make sure it's relevant. Make sure they understand what's a part of, and make sure it's time bound. Okay. Saying I want to have these things done in this way by this time. All right. We have some great work plan templates. Now, as you can see here, there's an example, and we're starting to kind of squish for time a little bit, so I'm going to speed up, and I apologize. But we are, looking at this example here, and you can see that inside of this example, there are actually some skills that youth are going to need, and there are some goals. Really quick, can you identify a skill that a youth would need to do this work? What skill do you see here? Time management. Yep, exactly. That is a skill, by the way. Great. Yep. Wonderful. Ability to use the mail machine. Yeah. You can't be like, hey, here's your mail machine. Good luck, right? You have to make sure they know how to use that. Yep, that's a skill. Consistency. Operating the machine. Yes. Great. Good feedback, you guys. Yeah. So again, when we're thinking about what they're going to be doing, the technology that they're going to be working with, there are skills that they need to have in order to accomplish those tasks. Working independently is also another skill, right? And that's something you can work toward or identify as an ability that a youth has. Knowing when to ask for help, essential, but also modeling that, setting them up for that success. Don't assume that they're going to have all these things, but also don't talk down to them when you're explaining how these things work. Just say it matter of factly, this is, hey, if you need help, make sure you ask me so I can help you out. It's no problem. I want to make sure you succeed. Framing those things is also going to be really beneficial for our youth. Now, when we're doing different types of work, there are things we need to be aware of. I've had some conversations with some employers that had some concerns, but they ended up being things we could figure out. Very important for all of us here, though, we need to be aware that interns under 18 cannot operate saws, forklifts, or motor vehicles. In other words, if you want them to take the company Ferrari out for a drive, unfortunately, they can't. They should not be using ladders or scaffolds. In other words, we don't want them getting up on really tall spaces and falling down and getting hurt. And they should also not be using power-driven equipment, ovens, lawnmowers, or weed whips. If you have any concerns or questions about any of this, by the way, please make sure you check in with me or your job coach. We'll happily have a conversation with you about that. Some really important safety procedures are to make sure to provide a safety orientation for the work site and all equipment. Maybe that machine also had like a whole bunch of razor blades on it. Okay. Make sure they're aware of those razor blades and how to be safe around them, and maybe get rid of those razor blades too. Make it safe. Okay. Ensure that your intern does not operate equipment prohibited by law. And by the way, in our supervisor resource page, we actually have those child labor laws. If you have any questions, or if you just want to like make sure you're on the right page 100% and in good legal standing, check it out. I'm guessing most of you are. But if you have any questions or concerns, just jump in there and check it out. And make sure your intern knows what to do in an emergency, whether it's a tornado. We've had a lot of tornadoes in the Midwest recently, right? Whether it's a fire, okay? Electrical outage, you name it. Make sure that your youth knows what to do. Make sure that's a part of your onboarding process. In the case of an emergency, you need to immediately assess and care for the injury and determine if the injury requires an emergency care. Then you need to call 911. Don't call me. Don't call your job coach. Call 911, and then let their parent know that something happened as well. Make sure that communication happens right away, and get them help right away if they need it. If it requires non-emergency medical care like first aid, and you have someone in your office like me that's first aid trained, provide that care. Okay. If it's minor and does not require medical care, then, you'll be able to figure it out. I think if you have any questions about that, however, you can call your job coach, but more importantly, have a conversation with a youth. If a youth is bleeding from the forehead and they say they're okay, they're not okay. Call 911. Okay. Make sure you do what you need to do. Now, we just covered a whole lot again here, and I'm going to get your fingers working again a little bit. I'm going to get your brains working, excuse me, again here for a little bit. We're going to take about 5 minutes, and we're going to jump into some breakout rooms. And Teresa, in just a moment, have those breakout rooms happen here. But I want you to think and have some conversations, and let me know about, talk with your fellow colleagues here about any questions, concerns, or best practices that you might have to share, and talk about whether or not do you feel prepared yet? And what do you still need to do? And it's okay to be candid here, okay? No one's going to judge you, and I'm sure you'll get some great advice if you have any questions or concerns. All right, Teresa, when you're ready, let's drop into those breakout rooms. I actually had a little, so welcome back, everybody. I got to have a little breakout room with Tanya, as you just heard probably a little bit, and we were having some great conversations. I hope you did as well. And again, we're recording. And thank you, Teresa.
There we go. Now we're all coming back.
All right, we're waiting for it.
Yep, now we're good.
Nice, everyone bouncing in. All right, thank you. So first of all, I'm sure that everyone here had some really great conversations. I know that Tanya and I were having a good conversation here, and we were just talking about like how important it is to think about all these things. Some of it seems like kind of common sense, and some of it seems new. Maybe some of it just reminds you, that we need to do some things, and that's what this training is for. So thank you for engaging with this. Whether you're a seasoned veteran like Tanya is, or whether you're new, we love having you here. Some other tips, and I'm going to start moving a little bit quickly here because we're running out of time, for a really successful first week are to make sure you set clear expectations from the start to avoid any potential issues, especially work hours. In other words, talking about transportation logistics, talking about when work starts is really important, okay? Explain policies about being late or sick. In other words, who do you call, when do you call them? Be specific about whom interns should contact and how to do that. They need to have the right contact information. Maybe they need to sign into like a program that you have at work and say, I'm sick today. However that works, they need to know how to do it. Explain policies regarding appropriate attire, personal calls, texting, and internet usage. And I promise you, this is something you will have a conversation about. And if you're not on mute, make sure you jump on mute for me, please. Um, and like this is just part of living in a tech world, right? Youth have phones. Those phones are going to be around. How you communicate what is appropriate and inappropriate use of those phones is going to be something that's going to set them and you up for some success and hopefully mitigate any frustration. And this is really essential. Make sure you provide a tour of your workplace and introduce the intern to other employees. Make sure they know where the bathroom is. Make sure they know where the break room is. Do you have a refrigerator? What do you have for cooking? Make sure they have access to those things. And discuss logistics of lunch and taking breaks, right? They're used to being in a school where bells tell them when they're done with something. I don't work in a workplace where I have bells, though sometimes I wish I did. I should go take a break now, right? So just be really clear about how that should work in your workspace. And make sure you discuss and finalize the intern's summer work plan, right? So you're going to have that idea of what it is. You've already worked it out. They're going to start, and you're going to recognize like, oh man, I need to make sure that I have some accommodations in place. Or, oh man, this youth is so talented. I might need to give them something more challenging. But make sure they know what the work plan is, even if it changes, especially if it changes. All right. So, that kind of goes to that, making sure that you're providing structure, but being flexible to the realities of our youth. They might have, some responsibilities at home that maybe you never had when you were a youth. They might have some of those religious accommodations we need to think about. Being structured and flexible just means that we're communicating clearly about what that looks like so we can have those supports in place and so that the environment just feels like a place where they can get things done and be who they are. Do a quick check-in every day. How are you today? Hey, I noticed that you got like all of that work done really quick tomorrow. Did that feel easy? Right? Sometimes those check-ins aren't about what they're not doing well or where they're struggling. Sometimes it's about like the success that they're having and celebrate that success. You might have to flex into making something a little bit bigger because they've gotten everything done. They're supposed to get it done by the end of summer and they got it done in week 2. Oh my gosh. Right? That might be the flexibility. Whatever that is, if you can be ready to be in that space, you're going to be practicing some really beautiful supervisor skills, some mentorship skills, and that's going to help them thrive as well as, demonstrate to your organization how amazing these interns are. Throughout the entire process, throughout the entire time, make sure you're asking them about themselves. Learn their interests, their goals and needs, right? Do they like BMX biking? Do they like Pokemon cards? Are they into Roblox? Do they really care about developing models that can help overcome, I don't know, find muscles inside of waterways? What are they interested in? Maybe they're really into drones. Who knows? But you should know, hopefully, by having and sharing your interests and having those conversations. And do you need any flexibility? And how do you learn best? Think about that for yourself. And then think about how hearing that and having supervisors and colleagues that think that way impacts you. And then model it and ask the same questions to your youth. Okay. Can an activity or an introduction be added to something? Okay. Can you like have a little bit of, co-working time beside your youth as they're learning a new skill? Can you have an exercise? Does your organization have a training module? Right. And is there a backup plan? Like I said, what if the youth really struggles with the work? What if the youth excels so much that they've, already tackled your project, plus they've have 3 other ideas on how you can increase your bottom line? Be ready for both of those scenarios, and you're going to be okay. And how we can be ready for that is by, having those check-ins, having that communication, understanding the milestones and goals you're going after, but also by having a day-to-day plan. A nice way to think about, a workspace for a youth is modeling a little bit of the school like scenario, like the school world, right? So they have schedules and blocks throughout their days. They have classes and breaks. If you can think of your schedule a little bit like that and communicate about that and say, hey, from this time to this time, I want some work time. If you need to take a break, take it at 12 for 45 minutes, for 30 minutes. Um, you know, talking about that with them and being clear about it is going to really help them succeed. But writing it down and being clear about what they're going to be doing in each of these blocks is going to help them visualize what they're going to get done and also give them a measure for themselves about how they're doing. Set expectations around the time that they need to spend, right? So even if hours are flexible, start with a set schedule, okay? Youth thrive around structure, and clarity is kindness. Structure is clarity, okay? Be very clear about break times. Like I said, schools use bells and schedules. And if there are vacations they might have coming up, be very clear about when they should communicate that. I recommend double checking on day one. Hey, do you have any vacation time coming up this summer? You do. Okay. Well, or you don't. Okay. Just so you know, if you have something coming up, I need to know at least 2 weeks in advance because I've planned some things to do with you. Setting expectations around cell phones. Again, this is one of those spaces that I just have to touch base on. And this is probably going to be your number one challenge, not whether or not they care about what you're doing or whether they like you. It's going to be like, are they on TikTok? Are they on Instagram? Right. And this is just one of those things that you can go ahead and, nip the bud on by having a conversation right away. Say, hey, when you get to work, something that really helps me, and modeling is a really useful tool because that way it's not all about them and you're not setting a double standard. What I do is I put my phone on silent and I set it down. Do you have anybody that has to get a hold of you? Oh, you have a little brother that's home alone. Okay. Well, did you know you can create a workaround so that only they can get through to call you? Okay. Just have some conversations around those expectations and how to mitigate that distraction. And also make sure your colleagues are practicing the same thing that you're asking of them. If they are expected not to be on their cell phone and everyone around them is checking their cell phone, talk to your colleagues and maybe just have a frank conversation. Say, hey, you're modeling some behavior that's really undermining the success of our intern. Good luck if you have to navigate that space, by the way. So for you returning supervisors like Tanya, what have you done in the past that has worked well for the first week? Quick little bit of advice. Those of you that are new, those of you that are seasoned, those of you that are new, excuse me, take a moment and just read through the comments that our seasoned supervisors are going to share with you. You wonderful seasoned supervisors, drop some wisdom on us. What have you done in the past that has worked well for the first week? All right. I know everyone's really brave, so I'm guessing what's happening right now is you're trying to figure out how to get this. Yeah, there we go. Making a daily check-in workbook. Ooh, a workbook. I like that. That's even a step up. I like it. Nice. Listen to the youth. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Oh, did you want to share something, Alexander? Alexander, just so you know, you turned on your microphone there.
Sorry about that.
No worries, buddy. No worries. Thank you. Detailed schedule. Yes. Discover what interests there are and look at setting up informational interviews with other professionals. Oh my gosh. The networking. Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Help them connect to what they're connecting to what they're doing at work by helping them connect to other professionals. Oh, that's beautiful. Set up Microsoft classes and meet with interns after each class. Yeah, exactly. That's using those training tools that you have in your organization. Keep throwing up your wisdom in the chat. I'm going to keep moving forward. And I just want to really make sure that you know that every action your intern takes should be tied to a skill. Okay. They can be soft skills, they can be hard skills, they can be technical skills. And to get every intern ready for you, we've been providing work readiness training to make sure that they've got some good foundation for the skills they're going to need to work with you this summer. We've made sure that they have some communication skills. We've talked about what it means to have a positive attitude in the workplace, what it means to be a team player, and what time management means, and that being on a career path means that you're in a journey of lifelong learning. Now, does that mean our youth have mastered these skills? No. That's why we provide this opportunity together as a community. That's why you as employers are recognizing that developing this young, talented person means that we're going to have to probably address some of these things as well. Okay. And every youth is going to come with different abilities. Okay. Now there are, the MHA labs building blocks, and this is actually something we've been able to expand in the workbook, as you'll see, but, there are 4 things we really need to kind of break down here. So professional attitude, right? That's going to be some of those soft skills, bringing energy and staying calm and clear-headed and graciously accepting constructive criticism. Time management, understanding how to get things done, when to focus, when to be open to helping other people out, when to say no, when to say, hey, I'm open to more work. Teamwork ethics, how we communicate with each other, how we collaborate, how we make space to listen to others, and problem solving. And, our youth are going to have different skills they're going to learn from you this summer. And as I kind of move forward here, I want you to take a quick moment and think about 1 or 2 skills that your intern is going to learn from you. So what's something they're going to learn? I can write ours out right now. I'm going to say that our youth is going to learn how to do some interview skills and learn how to do some organization with Excel. Okay. Planning and collaboration, writing and research. Thank you, Zach. That's great. Yes. Nice. Time management. And what does that mean? That's great. Nice. Time management using technology. Beautiful. That's great. All right. Keep sharing in there, you guys. I'm going to keep moving forward here because I've got this wonderful trainer named Kayla that's going to be coming up here in just a second. So again, I'm just going to get to this ongoing communication part. As you can tell, it's something that really is key to success. And it's something that can be formal and informal, and in fact should be both. Those daily check-ins don't necessarily have to be formal so much as they need to be personal, right? That's where we're going to be stepping into our mentorship space. We're going to be talking about the aspirational aspects of their goals. We're going to talk about how we can inspire our youth by, like you said, networking them with other colleagues that share their interests or in a field that they really want to get into, expanding their horizons, having an open door policy saying, hey, if you have any issues, contact me. I'll take time for you. You matter. And weekly check-ins, which can be more on the supervisor side of things, where we're really doing, that coaching, technical skills, like how are things going? Have you gotten everything done? And really importantly, having those milestone check-ins as well. Providing continuous feedback is something, like I just said, is going to happen on a daily, weekly, and milestone basis. Those daily check-ins are really about making sure that they're doing okay, that they understand the work they need to do and the tools they are using to do that work. And this is a skills-based lens, soft and technical, right? So, hey, I saw you write me an email. I noticed you didn't have, a hello line, and it was 1 sentence, and that was it. I don't even know who sent this email. Okay. You might have some communication skills you have to teach. Weekly check-ins are going to be hopefully more attached to those weekly milestone goals. And then specific milestones are like, hey, we've accomplished task A. That sets us up to do task B. Let's talk about how this went. What went well? What was challenging? What can we do better? And why do check-ins make a difference? Well, when asked if their experience was valuable, youth who had a supervisor who gave them feedback about their performance never, or only once, or like rarely, did not have the same kind of experience as youth who had a supervisor who checked in a few times a week or daily. Now, I'll just confess that I kind of know that most supervisors check in pretty regularly. A lot of you are really wonderful and really intentionally dive into the space, but check this out. So when asked if someone was a valuable experience, interns who said someone on the staff talked with them about their future, never or once, a lot more youth started having a hard time, having a good experience, but also understanding the relevance of what they're doing. And interns who had a staff that was having conversations and mentoring them a few times a week, or even just once a week, had a much better experience and felt like they probably were on a path through the work they were doing with you to cultivate a career. Interns who said someone on staff talked with them about their future plans never or once, did not have a really good experience throughout the entire summer. In fact, almost half of those youth felt like they did not have a great summer. because that mentorship thing is personal. It's something that brings them into your community, makes them feel welcome. And we talked about this a little bit, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but there is a difference between coaching and mentoring, being a supervisor and a mentor, right? So coaching and supervising are that technical, goal-oriented. These are the things you need to know how to do your job. This is what we need to do to get our job accomplished, right? And mentoring is that aspirational, inspirational, personal, soft skill area where they're going to really cultivate those skills and those goals, and an understanding of how the work they're doing with you is going to help them build towards their career, but also maybe even what they actually want to do with their lives. Not every young person has a clear path that they want to go after. When we're giving feedback, I want to make sure that you use this model here, okay? The learn model. That's what youth are here to do, is they're here to learn. So I want you to listen with empathy and understanding to the young person's perception of a situation, even if you don't agree with it. And I want you then to make sure that you explain your own perception of the situation in a way that's respectful, clear, and also transparent. If that made you feel bad, maybe they said something that was insulting, or maybe they just were on their phone, okay? It's going to be different, different scenarios, different realities. And then acknowledge and discuss the differences and similarities. Try to find that common ground, because that common ground is going to help you build a solution to avoid the thing that was, causing the issue. Together, you're going to recommend some solutions. I always say, like, sometimes asking a youth to recommend a solution is the best way to get buy-in. They're more likely to say, hey, that was my idea, I should probably stick to it, right? And then negotiate an agreement based on that ideation and thought partnership. Another good model is the coin model, right? So this is one of those things where you can say, hey, during our work block this morning, my expectation was that we were going to be focused, and I was kind of noticing that you were on your cell phone on TikTok a lot. And that made me feel like you didn't really care about this work. And we had, come to this understanding that we were going to try to get this done today so that we can achieve these goals. It really would be helpful if, maybe you put your phone in the desk next time. And, is there anything that's going on that's really important in your life? Are you okay? Even a check-in here can also open up an opportunity for them to share something that might be impacting why they're distracted. Course correction is something that often happens with, a managerial position. It's something that's going to happen with your youth this summer. Don't make it an adversarial process. Make it a collaborative, constructive process. And we have some forms that are going to be useful for you to use in that supervisor webpage. And intern performance improvement plan is something that's going to work to correct unacceptable behavior. It's going to be clear about what that unacceptable behavior is and why it's unacceptable and how it has a negative impact. And then we're also going to talk about coaching and mentoring around that, because we want to recognize this as an opportunity for growth. It's something that must be documented. Okay. So if by the end of the summer you contact me and say, hey, my intern was always on their phone and they never showed up for work on time, I'm going to ask you, well, did you have an evaluation process? What kind of course corrections did you take? And did you document this? Also, I really hope you were talking with your job coach, because this should not be something that anyone is surprised by. We're on a team together. Our Step Up team and you are here to work together to overcome these challenges. Okay, so make sure that we're on the same page on this. And in the forms packet for intern performance improvement plan, or you'll find the intern performance improvement plan, so you can use this. There also are some evaluation templates that you can use. So when you get to that evaluation process time, those milestones, hopefully at least have a couple of these throughout the summer. You've got a template that you can use to go ahead and facilitate those conversations and that documented feedback, okay? This is also a really important experience for your youth, because evaluations are a part of our professional careers, and they're a space where we, need to be comfortable, because we're going to recognize places where we're strong and places where we need to grow. Of course, we are here to support you. I hope that one of your big takeaways today is that you are not alone. You have this incredible employer community around you with other supervisors. You have everyone here at Step Up, and you have your job coach. I want to be very clear. You have a job coach that's there to answer your questions, to be your first point of contact. And if you need any additional resources, if you have any questions, if anything is like funky for you or not going in the right direction, or if the youth is consistently not showing up on time, we're here to help you resolve those challenges and move forward in a constructive way. Supervisor resources that we have in the hidden resource page for you are going to include that supervisor handbook. We've been around since 2003. Throughout all of that time, we've aggregated a lot of great resources and wisdom that is all housed inside of the supervisor handbook. The forms packet is going to have these forms that are going to be useful for you and some templates that are going to be useful for those milestones and check-ins and corrective actions you may need to take. The additional resources are going to have resources for, any kind of critical emergency, or even just something that recognizes that maybe your youth needs some clothes or some additional supports. It's going to help you navigate that space. And your job coaches are going to be here to have your back all summer long and after if you have any questions. And we're going to be doing some supervisor check-in sessions together this summer. They were called coffee breaks last year. They're going to be a lot more curated this year. For example, we're going to have Ray McCoy come in and do a talk about reasonable accommodations. And we have some other great folks that are going to be jumping in to make sure that you have some resources that you recognize that you need throughout the summer. So having an open dialogue with your job coaches, diving into those resources that we have, saying what you need when you need it, raising red flags is how we're going to come around each other to make sure we all have a great experience this summer. Your Step Up job coaches are literally here for your intern and for you this whole summer. We're in contact with the interns. We're in contact with you. We might hear some things from the intern that we need to talk to you about. Don't be insulted. We're just here to facilitate a really great experience. We might hear things from you that we need to talk to our intern about. We're going to coach them in the same way. We're here to help make this a great experience. The job coach is the primary contact for questions or concerns. Think of us as your help desk, okay? And we're also a great resource for making sure you know how to use all of those resources. Job coaches are going to be in contact with you and with our youth throughout the summer. So become familiar with your job coach. They're amazing. In fact, I am really proud to introduce you to my incredible team this summer. And Mariah is a seasoned veteran. Samayo is coming in with some really great technical skills. She's going to be around this summer. Gia, not Kia, Gia with a G, is a seasoned youth worker as well. Teresa is an incredible resource and actually a master's student for youth work. Talia is my fellow manager and also a great resource, and I am also going to be a job coach this summer too. Everyone here is here to help you out, to have your back. If you have not yet become familiar with your job coach, reach out to them. We're really friendly and really easygoing. We're here to help you out. Some of the things that we're going to be doing in those supervisor check-ins are we're going to have some curated topics. You're going to get some information, ask questions, share ideas. We're going to also maybe do some troubleshooting, okay? I'm trying to go pretty quick here. I know that Kayla's probably already in the chat, but we're going to take a break in just a second. Our whole goal this summer is to achieve an experience for you and your intern that is rewarding. For your intern, that means that they've cultivated some new skills, developed a new network, have a letter of recommendation. For you, it means you've gained some insight into how young people work, into the skills that you need to work on in yourself to make sure you're training people, into the onboarding processes and training materials that your organization has. This is an opportunity for you and your intern. Use it. It's valuable. And I hope it helps you continue to improve the way that you're working with your colleagues and with new employees coming into your space. And again, that letter of reference is something we'd love for you to have. We're going to have some celebration at the end. If you have any questions for me directly, I am the Employer Engagement Manager for Step Up Level 2. I'm here to answer those questions and to be supportive in any way that I can for you this summer. We're going to go ahead and take a quick 5-minute break, and then Kayla's going to take over. It's not going to be any more than 5 minutes because I actually ran over a little bit. I'm sorry, Kayla, if you're here. And go ahead and take a moment. I'm going to drop offline myself for a second. We'll see you in 5 minutes. Thank you so
I think most of us, I didn't cue you, sorry. This is only the third time we've done this, y'all. So we're still working out the kinks. But I think, regardless of whether you are, supervising interns or supervising other staff, it's your first time or it's your, 15th year. I think lots of us have had lots of experience and training really on what I think about is technical supervision, right? The ability to think about onboarding and creating space for welcoming and really understanding policy and procedure and few of us have had explicit sort of in training around things like coaching and even some of this idea of adaptive supervision. And so we're going to spend some time today talking about this idea of being adaptive, particularly in the context of difference around identity. And my hope is that you'll walk away with some tools to support all of the work that you do. So again, Kayla Richards, she, her, or she, they work for me, and grateful to be in space with all of you today. So the plan for today is really to set some context. And I'll spend just a couple of moments naming some of the assumptions that I hold when working with young people, but really when working with people in general. We'll talk about this idea of workplace culture and really sort of hone in on this idea of culture. There's a lot of conversation and dialogue and discourse around culture, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We'll then spend some time in conversation about supervisory relationships and what a lot of those look like in the context of working in a U.S. workplace. My hope is then to spend some time in actually practicing this idea of capacity building. I know all of you are very excited about small group work. I promise I won't make you role play unless you're really into that. And then we'll spend some time with some of the tools that I hold near and dear, and hopefully have some time to sort of debrief. Does that sound reasonable for today and like what you signed up for? Thank you so much for the head nods, the COVID thumbs. So before I dive too deeply into some assumption, I want to just set some context for me. So again, Kayla Richards, I'm trained as a clinical social worker and spent most of my really early career, if you will, I think I'm still there, in residential services and really working in sort of, this idea of deep end work with young people. So young people who had, really acute mental health needs and family systems that were experiencing a lot of sort of distress in their attachment and separation. And in the last 5 years have really started to do more of sort of the macro practice where I'm thinking about program development and I'm thinking about this idea of supervision and coaching as really being a tool for creating more equitable spaces and places. I teach at St. Thomas part-time. I just finished my 3rd year of a PhD program at the U. Thank the creator. It is summertime and I am very excited about that. I work part-time for a small social justice organization. We're really a think tank in South Minneapolis called the Minnesota Justice Research Project. And then I'm part-time at Hennepin County in behavioral health as an administrator. So spend a lot of time thinking about systems change. I spend a lot of time thinking about the importance of culture and strategy, but also about young people and intervention. And I grew up on a really big reservation in South Dakota. And so I've lived here about 15 years or so. So I am a transplant, but it definitely feels like home. And I remember really early on having these experiences with my unchi or my grandmother, where I noticed difference in terms of the way that folks engaged with her and the way that she engaged with others, both in terms of tone and language and even her own body language. Right. So when we were at home, people really viewed her as being, she was revered, sort of sat at the head of the table, and folks would stop by when they needed to problem solve in our community. And then when we were in more formalized institutions like schools or public aid offices or the Indian Health Service that was in a city nearby the reservation, people often talked about her with her in the room, but not to her. I would watch her walk into these buildings and sort of shrink herself. And so from an early age, I've had a lot of curiosity about this idea of identity and the way that we all know or come to know what it means to be one another. And so when I think about this work, there are a lot of core assumptions that I hold that I think are important to share that really will sort of guide some of our work. That is that I really believe that learning is a basic human need. Right? When we think about brain development and neuroscience, our brains are use-dependent tools, love patterns, love meaning making, and will often fill in the gaps of incomplete patterns or stories. I think a lot about storytelling in my work, but that we're all primed to learn, which is why I think your work is so critical. I think every child can learn and self-actualize. Every single one, even the ones who are born into positions of adversity, even ones we don't like, even ones who keep us on our toes, every single child. I really believe that the world as we know it now has not always looked this way. And the beauty of that is I feel compelled to believe that there are real human-made solutions to very human-made problems. And it's possible to create organizations and learning relationships that provide these equitable and rigorous learning experiences, right? One of the things that I know growing up where I grew up is that the impact and collateral consequence of things like oppression and poverty is that often what feels possible is about this big, that horizon of possibility really gets shrunk. And it was through my own internship experiences and mentors that horizon for me really was stretched. And I really think about that as your role, right? The creator and stretcher of possibility. I really believe that human beings, all of us, have emotions, and that's our right to experience them, engage with them, and that often when done in the context of a safe supervisory relationship, we actually learn a lot from them when we attend to them. And so I believe that's actually part of a supervisory practice, and we'll talk about that today. And I want to acknowledge and name that inequities are pervasive, right? Unjust structures are very real, but it's the structures and institutions that are the problem. And people behave and believe the things that they do because of their socialization experiences. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. I'm curious, as we step into the work, how many of you, by show of hands, and feel free to get wild, take a risk on a Tuesday morning and hop off mute and talk to me, are supervising interns for the first time this year or this summer? So first time soups. Oh, I love that.
It'll be my first time as well.
Thank you. Nice to hear you. Who's talking?
Hi, Kayla. My name is Teklu.
Hi. Thank you, Teklu.
Yeah. Thanks for being with us today.
Of course. Wonderful. Ariana, Stephanie, Aaron. I love it. June, Kathleen, welcome to the club. I'm so grateful for the work that you do. Again, I really do believe that internship experiences just like this one really do have the power to shift what young people believe is possible. And so I appreciate your work deeply. So that's really helpful context just in terms of who's in the room for me. A couple other things I'll name that I think are important context are just some invitations that I will offer you to hold. And that is that I think when we talk about things like race or power, it lands on different bodies in lots of different ways, and that's okay. And I would encourage you to come back to curiosity. We're going to talk a lot about that word today. And hold that when you feel, things in your feet or throat or brain and I will also invite you to do what you need to do today. I'm not going to story tell about, how important you think this training is, if your camera's off, if you're eating, if you need to use the restroom. I'm just going to hold that you're doing what you need to do to take care of yourself today. All right. I mentioned this idea of socialization experiences, and often I think a lot about development when I think about all things people, and development in a couple of ways. Development in terms of just what we know to be true about learning, right? And learning sort of processes and cycles, but also development in terms of lifespan development, right? Where are folks at in terms of their chronological age? What are some of the needs they might be trying to meet based on their chronological age? What should our expectations be based on chronological age, which is one part of development, right? Then you think about a whole host of things like experience and socialization and all of that fun stuff. And there are lots of scholars that write about this idea of experiential learning or internships, right? And so the point of the slide is not that you understand that there are 5 distinct phases or 6 phases that young people come in and sort of move through while they spend time with you. It's that I really want you to hold this idea that internships and experiential learning are different than regular work because of the role of supervisor. When I think about my regular 9 to 5, most of my supervisor's work is about helping me sort of build different capacities, and then some of that technical supervision that we talked about earlier, right, for just a brief moment. When I think about the idea of an internship experience and young people coming in, it's that it is a guided process where young people both experience content and then they come back to us, their supervisors, and we help integrate that learning for them. And we do that by processing, right? And providing a secure base for them to do that integration. Without the processing, without the meaning making, they don't integrate the learning, right? So I mentioned that I teach at St. Thomas, and when I have young people who are placed at practicums where there's not a lot of supervision, they walk away from those placements regardless of what's happening with just less learning than young people who have less exposure to clients but have more intensive supervision, right? Because again, that process of integrating their learning isn't happening. And so for us, our job is to help them make meaning of what they're experiencing and do that really overtly, right? And so young people will sort of come in and have lots of different expectations of what the internship process is. They'll work through their onboarding and then start to develop some competencies. And then your role also gets to start to shift, right? As young people start to understand what they're doing more and more, you get to shift from technical supervisor and onboarder to mentor to coach. And that can be really, really fun. We're going to keep going. What is culture? What is workplace culture? Who has it, and what does it have to do with supervision? Feel free to use the chat, come off mute, let go of the attachment of being right, get wild. What's coming up? What's workplace culture?
That's a big one.
It sure is. I would say is how you build a community with people around you.
I love it. Community and how you build that community around you. Bill, I saw that you came off mute. What do you got?
That was me. Like how you build community with people around you. That's the thing we always try to do here, and I'm hoping to do with a few interns this summer.
Thanks, Bill. Kathleen, I see your hand up.
I'd like to take a different tack that's a little less generous.
Yeah.
And I think it's how an environment makes the individual feel.
For sure. Thank you so much. Right. So when I walk into a place, what is the feeling that I experience, right? That's absolutely about workplace culture. Absolutely. Teklu?
It makes me think of shared values or ideas, or maybe not values or ideas, but like it makes me think of respect, common language, or practicing common
Yes.
ideas of that.
Yes.
I'm trying to get at it.
No, you're walking us there. I feel like we're on a walk together, and it's true. I love you talking about this idea of values and norms, right? And then
Yeah,
language, right? Even the
yeah,
way we talk about things we
yes,
all love a good acronym, right?
right.
Those are all cultural for sure, for sure. Thank you. June says purpose and opportunity and leadership, appreciation of employees, right? What is that? What do those practices look like? Teddy says expectations, 100%. I love it. Jonathan says, culture is kind of the DNA of workplace. It's less what you say you are. It can be surface level to say you're inclusive. It's another thing to demonstrate it and live it. And I think Kathleen was talking about that, like how people feel, right? Teresa, what do you have?
I was going to say sort of the norm of the office, so to speak, because I work in an office, and so sometimes I try to kind of push that to make it a little more open discussions about the struggles we have and stuff, because that is important, because then you feel like that vulnerability, that people can see it and hopefully know that they can trust you too. So
I love it.
yeah.
So pieces around trust, but I'm also hearing, and we'll talk about this, like what is welcome to talk about and demonstrate and what is not, right? Even when we talked about this idea of emotions earlier, right? That is all about workplace culture, 110%. For the conversation today, and you all named parts of these things, right? I hold sort of three things when I think about shared patterns. And the third one is something we just, I think, have less practice at talking about. But that first is that shared patterns. And a lot of you talked about this, right? Patterns that contribute to how folks feel, how we know what we're supposed to be doing, right? So it's shared patterns that we use to make meaning, right? So some of this, even things about language, people use different language and we're able to tell stories or meaning make about what's happening. And then this third part, to determine what is and is not appropriate. So often I think about culture as this idea of things that we go out and experience or behavior that we use to tell stories and then use to decide what is okay and acceptable and wonderful and what is not, or what we decide is acceptable and then what we decide to police. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. I'll give you a quick example of this idea of workplace culture. So at this workplace that I work in the public sector, and often we have folks who come in and they're new employees, and the division I work in is big. The area I work in is really, really big. And so we'll have folks that come in all the time, and there'll be a welcome email, right? Here's a picture of Sharon and her dog, and Sharon's a new case manager. Welcome, Sharon. And this happened a couple months ago where folks then started to reply to welcome Sharon. And after a couple of emails, somebody replied in all red and in caps, which is really suggestive in an email. Please stop replying all, right? And so it seemed as though somebody had broken a workplace norm that was not written down anywhere. It wasn't in a process or a procedure. It was just this known practice that we had, that you don't reply all to all emails, right? And so that's such a small and simple, but really good example of the way that culture works, right? You walk into this space and there is a welcome, and you get welcomed via email. But if anybody reaches out to you on that same email to welcome you, that is not appropriate, right? And so that's such a good example. cultural norms help us fill in the gaps when we don't have a complete story. And often culture is also about our socialization experiences, right? So we learn what our culture is and what the culture of the world is in our homes, at our dining room tables, in our schools. And often there can be a cultural practice that is the same physical practice or the same pattern, but it might have a completely different meaning in a different place and time, right? So context is really critical when we think about this idea of culture, right? So I think about the context of the pandemic, right? And, you know, in a US workplace, I was socialized by a very traditional Midwestern father. And it meant that when I first met somebody in the context of my workplace, I would walk up and I would shake somebody's hand very firmly, like borderline painfully, right? Like this was just how I was socialized. It meant something about respect and to convey respect. And then the pandemic hit. And for a while we were away from each other. And then when we started to come back together, there was all of this weird, awkward walking in. Do you elbow bump? Do you just say, hey? And even now when I'm virtual with folks, there's a lot of this, and I always call them the COVID thumbs, right? Because again, we developed this new pattern of saying hi and greeting one another based on our context, even though the meaning was totally the same, right? And so that's what I want you to hold on to. Shared patterns that we use to make meaning or tell stories to determine what is and is not appropriate. We're going to do a little practice that's kind of humorous, but before we get there, the other thing I want to name about formalized institutions, so places like schools, places like most US workplaces, not all, places like courtrooms and institutions, higher ed in the United States, those workplace norms are often shaped by dominant groups and liken those preferences. So that's also really critical to highlight, that norms are really just preferences, right? And they often reflect the preferences of dominant group. And in the United States, dominant groups, contemporary and historically, have been white male property owners, right? That's just a reality. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I really want folks to get curious about this idea of a norm simply being a preference, right? It's simply a preference. So we're going to do a quick example to think about this idea of socialization and culture and storytelling and behavior, right? So I want you to think about this for a minute. If writing's accessible to you, you could write it down. If not, you could just hold it in your head. But I want you to finish the prompt in your head. So when I approach a yellow light, feel free to use the chat or come off mute. When I approach a yellow light, what do you do? I can feel some of you giggling. I love it. Prepare to stop if I can. Slow down. The honest folks hop in. I speed up. Evaluate quickly. Yes, Jonathan, I love it. Slow down if I'm far enough away. Pay extra attention. Take caution. Assess whether I can make it. Generally slow down unless I'm on ice, right? Determine if I should prepare to stop, right? What's going on? Totally depends. I love that some of you are like, I'm making a decision, an assessment. Some of you are like, I am flooring it. So when I was growing up, I took driver's ed when I was 13, because in South Dakota, you can drive at 14, which is funny because I live here now and that feels insane. But I did. and was taught by this elderly man, bless his soul. I think I like rolled through a stop sign actually during my test. And he still passed me. I'm an excellent driver. But where I lived, we didn't have stoplights. It was too small, right? It was really rural, but we had stop signs. But we would have this conversation about stoplights, and then we would practice. And he always got a kick out of being like, yellow light, green light. And I was socialized to believe that unless you were in the physical middle of the intersection, when a light turned yellow, you had to stop, right? You had to stop unless you were in the middle. Then you could keep going. And then I moved here. And the way that I now think about yellow lights has changed drastically. And again, some of you really started to talk about this idea of context, right? What is the weather? Who's in the car with me? Whose car am I driving? How fast am I going? How long is the yellow light, right? All of those pieces of context. But let's pretend for a second that I am a slow downer all of the time. I always slow down, regardless of what's happened. And let's pretend for a second that Lisa, who named they were a speeder upper. So Lisa is a speeder upper. So I'm driving, Lisa's behind me, the light turns yellow and I slow down, stopping Lisa and her efforts to speed through the light. What kind of stories might Lisa be telling about me? And this is a recorded workplace training, so be mindful. But what kind of stories might Lisa be telling me? About me, about my identity? What might they be saying? Lisa, unsure driver. Maybe they don't know. Oh, Bill, I love this. They are quite possibly unkind, right? They are doing this to me. Joe, you're a bad driver. I love that you're being honest. Yeah, you're a terrible driver. Get out of the way. June might be frustrated. We both could have made that light for sure. Kia, that's me all the time. Yeah, Katie, you're unsafe, not me. The assumption about your age, right? There might be something related to assumption about your age or the experience you have with driving, right? Maybe you're lost. So lots about who I am as a person, my identity, my age. I love that Teklu, you just said outrage. So depending on context, I might be outraged if I'm running late, if I had, just don't have as much capacity that morning. So this story is kind of a simplistic one when thinking about this idea of socialization and culture and storytelling. But storytelling is really powerful. And when we think about coming into contact with younger people, or maybe clients or residents that we serve, and the way that sometimes we encounter behavior that feels really unlike our own socialized expectation in relationship to a norm, we storytell and start to tell all kinds of stories about their capacity, their ability, their willingness to work, or their curiosity. And so part of our work in being adaptive is to pump the brakes and get really curious about when we are storytelling. And we're going to talk about some tools that might help us do that. So as a quick summary, when you think about this idea of culture, right? And as another cultural practice, you'll see I've done here is we love the use of an iceberg, right? To talk about things in and outside of our awareness. But you go out into the world and you experience these patterns, right? Or this behavior, and you start to make meaning of what's happening. You interpret those patterns through your own socialization practices, right? The way that you learned about things, the way that you learned about how you knew things, the way you learned about how you knew things with people, with certain people, but also away from other people, right? And our work is to really lower that waterline. So things in our awareness related to culture might be language or clothes, right? Dress in the workplace is a very hot topic. We'll talk about that a little bit. Dance, food, cultural symbols. But the stuff under there can also be things like facial expressions and notions of leadership, handling of emotions, right? Concepts of status mobility. When I think about stuff that comes up at work, it's things like group decision making, right? I'll often hear comments about somebody's inability to make a decision. And it's like, well, let's get really clear about what might actually be happening. Tempo of work, right? That's wildly cultural. Approaches to problem solving, conflict. I've lived in Minnesota 15 years and I am still thought of as being a wildly direct person at work. And I would say that I just name what is true for me. But again, our workplace culture in Minnesota around this idea of conflict, is different than it might be in other places, right? And so often when we talk about this idea of lowering the waterline, people ask, well, how? So we'll talk about a couple of tools today, but I think one of the biggest things that you can do as a supervisor is ask, right? Not attend a training about what it means to work with Black youth, because I would ask Black youth where, during what time, experiencing what, right? But ask. In the X amount of years that I've been working in public workplaces, I don't know that I've had a supervisor almost ever ask me about my preferences. Preferences around handling conflict, around communication, even around something like clock time, right? Because again, those are all neutral things that we then assign meaning to, usually using dominant group preference. So let's ask. We're going to talk a little bit about identity, and I'll give you some time to think about the way your own identity shows up at work. When I talk about identity, I use this example of a house. And this is reproduced with permission from an organization called Team Dynamics. I worked for them for some time, and they do diversity and equity and belonging work. They've gotten quite small over the last couple of years. But I love this example of using house to sort of teach and think about identity. Often when organizations hire me to come in and do like leadership training or leadership coaching, or maybe an equity audit, or just a couple of series around things like identity and belonging and workplace culture, they will ask about, conversations around identity, where and when, and those kinds of things. And I would argue that identity is always present, and therefore every conversation is about identity, right? Parts of our identity might be fixed, right? Some parts of our identities are fixed, while others are fluid. And the way that we hold almost all of them are fluid and contextually dependent. And what I mean by that is, depending in different contexts, we might be more or less aware of different rooms, for example. So you'll see in the house, there's a room for immigration and class and language, religion or faith, age, ability, gender, race, sexuality, ethnicity. And then there's also this what else room, right? Because again, depending on context, your what else room could be a lot of things. It could be master gardener. It could be ambidextrous queen. It could be widow. It could be solo parent. It could be first generation college student. There are a lot of rooms that could be. When I name that context matters, I think about a couple of examples from my own life, right? So I think about when I'm teaching at St. Thomas, for example. So I teach in the School of Social Work. And often the young people that I work with are feminine presenting or identify as women. And so it's not very often that I think about gender, right? Because most of us in my classes and in my room sort of have some similarity in our identity markers. I just don't think about gender very much. But that same room for me, gender expression, I am feminine presenting and I identify as a woman. When I worked in corrections and I would be inside institutions and inside the courtroom and inside of jails, I thought a lot about gender, right? It was really present for me. And it really drove sometimes the way that I dressed, the way that I thought about shoes or skirts or, things, my hair, right? And so the same room for you might look really different at home, or you might have a different level of awareness at home than when you are at work. We will come back to this idea of house, but I'm curious, what do you notice about the house? Does anything stand out for you?
I noticed the foundation level, so to speak, the basement, has ethnicity as the base, so to speak, is how I would look at it. Yeah.
Love it. So what is the base? I love it. You're noticing like different placement of the rooms, right? Maybe there's a room that called your eye. All of these rooms are really important. None of the rooms are strategically placed, and I probably should move ethnicity out of the room. Poor ethnicity in the cobwebs has been down there for a while. However, race is the front door, and that is because I mentioned this idea around context. Your different rooms and sort of the way that intersectionality works and you experience, right? The patterning, your own unique pattern of rooms matters. There are a lot of differences here that make a difference, right? Differences around faith or age or ability make a difference in how you experience the world. And in the United States, race is the biggest difference, right? Race, even in the context of intersectionality, even in the context of gender expression or sexuality, race trumps all of those things and all of the various combinations in the United States, right? That race can actually be predictive of things like educational attainment, whether or not you own a home, whether or not you have a passport, those kinds of things. And so that's really important context when we talk about identity in the United States. Other pieces of context, when I think about good examples, I think about, folks from Southeast Asia or China during the, COVID pandemic. I think about Muslims and folks who wear hijabs after 9/11, right? Rooms are parts of identity that were important to them. And then given, a certain context in the world, parts of those identities being wildly present and a lot of attention being paid to them, right? So again, identity is always present when you are working with young people and in your workplace, but context is really important as well. We're gonna keep going here. When I think about the biggest differences that will probably make a difference with the young people you're working with, my understanding is that for level 2 folks, you're working with young people who are younger, but younger than some of us maybe, but still in that older sort of group of young people. And I think about, developmental milestones that young people in that age group have. I think about the ability and longing for greater independence. I think about young people who have the ability to really engage in abstract thought and sort of delay gratification. And for those of you who are working with level 2 young people who are placed in this level, the ability to maybe onboard at a different pace than folks who are working in level 1, and therefore maybe step into things like mentorship and maybe some autonomy earlier on, right? So lots of differences that will likely make a difference. And I want you to get curious about that with the young people you work with. And we're going to talk about how you might do that in a little bit. Before we do that, I would love for all of you to spend a little bit of time completing your own house. So we're going to, thank you so much. Our wonderful tech support just dropped it into the chat so you can download it for your own eyes. if that's accessible to you. And so I'm going to give you, a couple of minutes to sort of take a look at your own house and complete your house with your own identity markers. We will then get into small groups and respond to a couple questions, and then we'll debrief as a large group. So I will throw these questions in the chat, but your instructions are to take a look at your house. If writing is accessible for you, maybe write down your identity markers, or you could just type if that's accessible to you in a Word doc. So what is your race? How would you describe your class? Are you a U.S. citizen, or do you have dual citizenship, right? When we think about the immigration room, how many languages do you speak? Or yes or no, I have a visible or invisible disability. So I'll give you a couple minutes, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms, and we're going to respond to some questions about what it was like to fill out your own houses, and what are some of the rooms that you might really have a lot of awareness of when you're at work and when you're in supervision. So I'll give you a couple of minutes now to work on your houses. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Jeff and Jonathan, Rosalind, Teresa, Kathleen, nice to see you all. Wonderful, we're getting there.
Yep, I believe we're all back now.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm curious, as you were in your groups and it went by probably way too fast, what did you hear, or what came up for you yourself? What were there rooms that you're more or less aware of? Did this exercise feel hard? What came up for you? Feel free to use the chat or come off the mic. We'll hear from just a few people before we move on, but what came up?
This is tough for me, especially in the time period, but I feel like a big part of it maybe for me would be coming to meet the other individual and where they see themselves as a person, trying to meet them there and working from that place, if that makes any sense.
It does. And I think often that is actually absolutely how we're socialized to think about, engaging with other, or the other is, getting really curious about where folks are coming from, and attempting to meet them there. I feel like there are those of us that have more practice at sort of thinking about our rooms, right? Both in the context of work, but just life in general. And some of that is about safety for folks with Black and brown bodies. Some of that is about your own family system and their orientation to things like identity, right? It depends. We all are in very different places on a spectrum. And so for me, it's really important to think about, one, this idea of practice, right? Nobody is more woke than anybody else. That's maybe a controversial statement, but this is really about invitation to be curious and practice. And so I invite you to get curious and practice. And two, that often we are socialized to think about other, but I think when we get really curious about our own rooms and our own experiences at work, and we start to understand that we all have different socialization experiences, it creates room for the possibility that others also have socialization experiences, right? That may be similar or different from you. Thanks for sharing. Let's hear from one other person. What came up for you?
Hi, this is June. One thing I noticed, I lived overseas for 25 years in the UK and in Australia, so I am a dual citizen. But when I came back to the United States in my hometown and started working, it was clearly brought to my attention of my language. I was using different words, even though I was speaking English.
Yep.
And the reaction from people. Some were understanding and some were laughing at me because
Mhm.
I wasn't speaking like they speak. So
Yep.
that's something that made me feel uncomfortable for quite a while, but then I think people started understanding me more and knew what type of personality I was, even though I spoke different words.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing. So this piece around like immigration and lived experience and culture and how that influences language, it sounds like really landed with you. And when you were talking, what came up for me is often I'll hear folks talk about like slang and use of different language in workplace. And there's often this assumption that slang is really remedial, right? That if folks use a lot of slang, it suggests something about their intelligence or capacity for intelligence. And I have to sort of come back to this idea that it's cultural, right? And those aren't the same. Those aren't the same. But again, when we're socialized around a particular set of norms around what is professional, so language, hair, dress, body art, like that, all of that has come a really long way in the last couple of decades, right? You can't see me because we're not in person, but I have sleeves, tattoos. And I remember, first starting to get them, and my poor father, about had a heart attack and was like, what, you're never going to get a job. What are you going to do? And, because that again was his socialization experience. And, I've worked in lots of, professional settings and emergency departments and courtrooms where I wore, professional dress, but my arms were exposed. But I also have fair skin and have a lot of access to resource. And so I think about some of the interns that come in that maybe have body art or dress differently than we might, expect, if you will, and the kinds of stories we tell about professionalism. And so I love your example of language. And again, I think our work is to get curious about our own rooms, right? Our own rooms. Are there rooms that I don't think about ever? Are there rooms when I'm at work that I would never think to talk about? And when I'm at home is really, really important to me. And then get curious about why those differences exist. The last thing I'll say about the room, and then we're going to talk about supervisory relationships and power, is that I will use the room when I'm working, or the house, if you will, when I'm working with interns or new staff. Not always the first time I meet with them, right? But maybe during our first couple of introductions, I will sit down with the house and we will complete our houses together, right? And that's a nice way then to start having conversations around things like preference and communication, right? So I'll say, listen, I'm 35. If you call me, I will think something's on fire. You can text me all the time. Here's my cell phone number. But if you call, I will think it's actually an emergency. Also, I am dead at 9:02 p.m. every evening. And so if you text me after 9, I will also think there's a fire. But if you call me, or excuse me, if you text me at 5:30, I'll be up, right? Those are just my preferences. And so getting curious and allowing interns to have some space and room to have different preferences is a really great way to do things like share power and really work to invite them into your space. In the context of the United States workplace, again, this is most places, this isn't all of them, but most of us live in a world where hierarchy is very real, right? And those hierarchical differences really create difference in power. And we're going to talk a little bit about this idea of power in just a minute. But what I will name is that most of us are really uncomfortable with conversations around power because we just aren't well practiced at having them. And most of us are really well socialized or practice in being curious and locating where we don't have power. We can really feel that viscerally versus when we do actually have power. And power is not a good or a bad thing. It's just a very real thing. I think when you decide that you are going to supervise people, interns or staff, but especially staff and interns, I think that you really have signed on to this responsibility that you are going to find the possibility in all processes and all people. And that's a huge responsibility, right? And some days I feel really good about that and that feels really easy. And then there are some days where I'm working with a staff that I don't like, or a young person that I don't like. I'm just really honest about that. I would never tell them that. That would be rude and wouldn't serve any purpose. But there are young people I've met I just couldn't really get along with, or you rubbed one another. Not very often, but it happened. Or staff that I just really struggled to support. And it is hard to coach and support people you don't like. Even under the guise of, it is my job, I am a professional, I have to. Your mental models and emotions are still present in your body and it impact how you engage with these folks. And so part of our work is getting really curious about some of that stuff, right? So power. We're going to spend just a couple minutes talking about power. And again, the goal of this slide is not that you can name 4 or 5 different kinds of power and talk about the scholars, who did them. Oh, thanks, Kathleen. But that you understand that there are various kinds of power that show up in lots of different ways, right? Again, power is not a bad thing. I want us to get curious about how you use power and then how you see it indexed or over-indexed for maybe a certain kind in your workplace, and to get curious about why. So referent power is really just this idea of sort of, feeling likable and liked in relationship, right? And so when I was, 22 and somebody decided that I should be in charge of a residential facility, which was wild, but it happened for several years. I was very outgoing. I didn't have a child. It was just a different life for me. And so, people would come into the break room and I was often standing up and talking, and I had a lot of referent power, right? The ability to sort of bring people in and make them feel welcome, or the ability to not invite them out, to not invite them in, right? So when you think about your own workplaces, like, are there people that tend to be those sort of social movers and bringer closers or push awayers? That's power, right? Expert power is just really this idea of folks who have specialized skills and expertise. My sense is that lots of you have some form of expert power. It's why you've been asked to take on an intern. I always talk about my IT folks. Not a single time in my career has somebody who works in IT called me for assistance. Not a single time. The number of times that I have called my IT people, depending on the week, is quite large, right? They have a lot of expert power. So when folks come to you simply by the knowledge that you have, and maybe it's even institutional or organizational history knowledge, right? That's some expert power. You have power there. Reward power is really simple. The ability to sort of, approve time cards, give promotions, open a door to an opportunity. Some of that can be less harder to spot. That's all reward power. And then coercive power, which feels yucky to say, but we all, or most of us probably have that too. The ability to deny PTO, to not open a door to a promotion, or to, a shadowing opportunity that could lead to a job for a young person. And then there's a fifth that's also, possible in workplace and usually very common, and that's just positional power. Again, when we think about just the mere position you sit in and the hierarchy that we experience in US workplaces. And so again, most of us are good at noticing where we lack power, but might struggle to notice where we have this power. And so power is not a binary. It's not, yes, I do have it, no, I don't have it. It's way more nuanced than that, right? And context is also really important in this conversation. And so I want you just to think about, as you step into your role this summer, how you see power being used in your workplace. And where do you use power, and in what ways most often in your supervisory relationships, right? Is there a power that you tend to really move towards? And why is that? We've been talking about adaptive supervision for most of our, if all of our time together, and being adaptive really requires us to get curious about context, right? And that developmental framework we talked about earlier, and then ground our expectations in that context, right? And as somebody who sits in a position of leadership often, and when I work with different groups of people, and come in and do work in the organizations, I will usually ask them who benefits and who is burdened by this decision you are making. And that to me is a really powerful question, right? Who benefits and who is burdened in our decision making? And it can be, in relationship to very little decisions, right? About which dark, dingy intern basement room you're going to put them in. Where do we put the water cooler? What kind of procedures do we have around professional dress, right? What language do we use? To really big things like strategic direction and budget cuts, right? So who benefits and who is burdened? We're going to talk about power sharing for just a moment because I want to make sure we have time to take a look at our scenarios. And I always run behind schedule. I should know better. Power sharing can be implemented into your practice in some really simple ways. I think we overcomplicate things sometimes, right? So acknowledging your own power and getting curious about how you use it. When interns come in, I think about choice, choice, choice always, right? So do they have a choice about where they sit? Do they have a choice about their schedule? Do they have a choice about start and end time? Anytime you can offer choice to interns or folks you supervise, that is power sharing. When you're sitting in a meeting room and you've had conversations with your staff or interns all week and they have a lot to say about a new policy, and then you get into large space and nobody's saying anything. That's never happened to me. You have to get curious about the way you're designing your meeting space, right? How do you create space for sharing? Is it possible for young people to give a speech, to chair a committee that maybe you would be on, to move out of the spotlight? I always tell folks, I'm a very visual person. When there's big dinners or galas or ribbon cutting ceremonies, where do the executives stand and where do young people or frontline staff stand? That to me suggests a lot about power sharing. And so anytime you can give young people a choice, that is a way to power share. We're going to talk about a couple of tools, and I promise you'll have access to them. We're going to pop one in the chat in a minute. I apologize for my brevity, and this is where we are today. So this first tool I use a lot when I am coaching or when I'm struggling with a young person or a staff that I'm supervising. And it comes out of organizational development. It's actually part of the tool comes from some scholars from the 1970s. And they use this tool called Describe, Interpret, Evaluate. Acronym, we love those. DIE, it's a fun acronym. And then I sort of created some extra questions in this evaluation part to, again, think about socialization and your own practices and how you think about young people and behavior, right? So often when I'm going to coach, the first thing I do is walk through this tool as a series of questions. What am I seeing? So not Tommy is coming in late. Tommy arrives every day at 10:17. Well, there's a pattern there. They might be late, but what's that about, right? I interpret what it is that I am seeing. So what do I think about that? Oh, Tommy isn't following directions. I've had 3 conversations with him. Right? What do I think about what I see? And then evaluate. What do I feel about that? And what alternatives might exist? And then I pull my house out. What parts of my own socialization practice are influencing how I see this? Again, I was taught that if I'm not 15 minutes early, I am late, right? That might not be true for somebody else. And I think as supervisors, we walk a really fine line between trying to set younger people up for success in the workplace and assimilating them to dominant group preferences, right? There's a fine line there. And so you got to get curious about where you're holding hard lines and where there's space to be inclusive of somebody else's preferences. So DIE, describe, interpret, and evaluate. Again, I use this when I'm coaching or, need to get curious about a particular behavior. I said I always come back to the house. I keep the house close with me. We're not going to go through all these questions, but when I'm having a hard time coaching or I'm having a hard time just, with a team or a staff that I'm working with, I will often come back to this idea of my own identity. And are there things that I'm doing or things I'm refraining from saying based on my identity or the identities of the person I'm coaching? How are my emotions influenced by different identities? And so I will use these questions again to sort of process and think about what's happening to get me to a different place, or maybe help provide some clarity again when I'm doing some of that coaching work. This tool that our helpful support folks are going to throw in the chat in just a second is a 2-page, like a double-sided sheet, if you will, that you can download for your own use. The first side is really about technical and reflective supervision. We could spend a whole day talking about reflective supervision. But you'll notice there's a space for you to use for some of that technical supervision work or coaching work. So things like project updates, caseload stuff, to-dos and follow-ups. And then there's the house. And then there's some questions about reflection around identity, right? What are you noticing this week about how you're feeling about this particular room that we talked about last week? In what ways are you including other group preferences in your management of that team, right? I'm also really intentional when I coach. I make sure to stop and end, or even when I'm doing supervision, to start and end the same way. And I try not to multitask when I'm coaching, and that can be really hard, especially when we're virtual. And then this next backside is really about that adaptive coaching, where I spend some time, again, attending to myself. Am I in a place to coach? Right? So when there are, performance issues happening, I never coach towards the end of the week, because by Friday I just feel dead inside. I'm just kidding, but I am pretty tired. If you make plans with me on a Friday night, I will flake on you 9.5 out of 10 times. But my intentions are good. And so I usually coach and have those conversations. I try to do my group work or my team meetings towards the beginning of the week when I feel like I have a lot more capacity. So then you'll see our describe, interpret, evaluate tool is there. And then there are several other questions that sort of walk you through this process of getting curious about what's happening in group dynamics or in one-on-one coaching dynamics. Couple more slides. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to do this as sort of a large group, and we're just going to pick a scenario to think about. So here's 3 scenarios. You're probably all looking at the slide like, goodness gracious, Kayla, that's a lot of words. You broke every rule in the book about presentations. But there are 3 scenarios here about young people. The first is about a young person and professional dress, if you will. The second is about a young person and expectations around different software use to complete projects. And the third is about perceptions of a lack of youth engagement. So I would love for, if it's accessible to you, for you to take a look and maybe pick a scenario and think about your house or your describe, interpret, evaluate, and just sort of process what you might do or what kinds of questions might come up for you, or what comes up for you as you use those tools. And so I'll give you just a couple of minutes to read through a scenario and pick one. And then feel free to come off of mute or throw it in the chat. What's coming up for you? The last couple trainings, the third scenario has been really popular, and the first one as well. What's coming up as you take a look at scenario? Or is there one that you're like, goodness, I don't know, I wonder what other people would do?
Well, I'll just jump in then. Number 3 is a regular visitor in my week, working with students, grad students and undergraduate students, and times where I just can't figure out how to get someone going and then get them connected, and have to continually remind myself that that's on me, not necessarily on them. That's a tough one. That's a real tough one.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bill. I see that Kathleen also wrote scenario 3. My instinct is to ask them how they feel about it, but depending on how they respond, that could be a dead end. One of the things I think about, thank you so much, Bill. One of the things I think about, and you named this a little bit, is that when we think about a young person and their socialization experiences around formal institutions, the biggest one is school, right? And I know that schools, like lots of things, have shifted in terms of what culture is like in school systems. But I would argue even today that often engagement feels pretty formalized, during different times in a school setting, meaning young people come in and they speak only when sort of spoken to, and often they raise their hands, right? It's this very formalized sort of like, it's not facilitative, it's, instructor and sort of back and forth. And so when a young person comes into a meeting where maybe that space is a lot more informal and it's supposed to be a place where there's just an exchange of free flowing ideas, it's often that young people aren't practiced in that kind of group situation, right? It's one thing to sort of do a group project and be in a classroom and do some work, but it's another to sort of just be in a large space where folks say, no, we want to hear from you, and that's what we actually mean. And so often when it comes to community events, or when it comes to even meetings, I will preview with young people exactly step by step what they are going to observably see, and then what the invitation observably is, right? So Joey, it's going to feel really chaotic, but when I say I really want to hear from you, this is what it looks like, right? And I might even do that in a practice session with the rest of the team, which can feel kind of silly, but everybody feels silly and it kind of breaks the ice, right? If you're in a meeting and young people are having a hard time engaging, what I also might do is say, let's do some think, pair, share. So give folks a couple minutes to think about my question, pair up with the person next to them so they're facilitating a flow of ideas. So if a young person doesn't have anything or has something, but they're not sure how to contribute, they can practice in that context of just one other person, and then we'll come back to the large group, and they might feel more comfortable at that point. But to Bill's point, when you're struggling with engagement, I have to come back to, where are they at developmentally? Did they just finish their onboarding? Is this their first community event? Do they understand their role? And have I demonstrated their role, right? Like, I think I forget sometimes how explicit and overt I have to be when working with young people who, again, it's not that they don't have brilliance and lots of wisdom to share. They have all of that. It's that they are socialized, especially in the context of being in space with adults, often that they aren't invited to share, right? That there's a hierarchy and that they are less than. And so I think remembering this piece around their socialization experiences and then being able to sort of practice and really demonstrate what that looks like. Joey, we're going to practice. This is what it looks like, right? And my hope is that you'll experience less than that, because then it's not about engagement or motivation. It's about invitation and whether they understand the task developmentally, right? Those are very different things. Focusing on how you motivate an intern is different than helping them grasp and master a capacity. Those are different things. We could talk about scenarios all day, and I wish I could spend all day with you. Some of you might have things to do this afternoon, and so maybe you would tap out. but I want to give you a couple takeaways. One, thank you for spending some time with me. I really mean it when I say that this work is really, really important. When I think about my early experiences in workplaces and my ideas around what felt possible, I think about people. I don't think about tasks or projects. I think about people, right? And you have the opportunity to be those people. I think takeaways for today are understand that your supervision is a practice and make some decisions about whether or not you're going to step into the role of practitioner or not. And if you are, that means creating some supervisory rituals, right? That means getting together with other supervisors to get curious about building some practice around, how to do this in adaptive ways, how to be accountable to trying to do new things, right? Practice noticing and naming, right? So when you're in your workplace, what do you notice about who sits where and who maybe feels really, valued and speaks up a lot, who maybe speaks up less? What do you notice? And start practicing some of that noticing and naming. Lastly, our ability to hold complexity around difference is dependent on our wellness, right? And wellness is context dependent. On a Monday, not always, but usually I feel like I have a lot more capacity than on a Friday, right? I'm just pretty tired by Friday. And so my ability to be adaptive and have hard conversations just looks really different throughout the week. I have to be really tuned into what that is. Because my ability to hold space for interns and staff and navigate complex and nuanced situations is dependent on my wellness. So take care of yourselves. And I mean that in really big ways. Lastly, if you are a supervisor or somebody who spends time with interns, or you're a coach or a mentor, and it is rare that you have to ask yourself, why is this happening to me? What am I doing? Maybe I need to do this a different way. Oh, I hadn't thought about it that way before. You are likely perpetuating dominant group norms. And I'm not naming that as inherently a bad thing, but what I would name is, I don't know about all of you, but when I put puzzles together, I was socialized to do the outside first, right? The corners and edges. Well, my daughter's 5 and all of the puzzles these days are wonky, they're misshaped, there is not an edge. Some of them don't actually have like an arm to fit into another arm. And what I've learned is that the more difference there is around me, the faster I put those puzzles together, right? We're really socialized to over-index for commonality. Who our shared values will get us by, the way that we all believe about this thing the same. Well, the reality is you're all in the same workplace. Those shared values or shared identities are probably there. Let's get curious about the differences we all bring to the table and then leverage those to problem solve. And so if you aren't noticing difference in your workplace, it's likely because you are perpetuating sameness. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity in recognizing and celebrating difference. I wish you all the best of luck this summer. I'm so excited for all of you. I'm really grateful for all of you. If you want to hang out and talk about supervision or nerd out on coaching, I love to read about coaching. Shoot me an email. Would love to get a cup of coffee. And it's noon. So have a nice day. Thank you so much for spending some time together.
Thank you.
Kayla.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla, and thank you all. It has been a great afternoon. We appreciate you so much. You're going to get some surveys from us. We love your feedback, and we love open conversation because we are all here to grow and do better and to help our community grow and do better as well. And thank you so much for being a part of Step Up this summer. Kayla, you're a rock star, and we appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Scott.
Hey, Scott.